You're entering Corsi Nation.
It's Dr. Jerome Corsi, and today it is Tuesday. It's December 9th, 2025. Thank you for joining us on CorsiNation.com. We're doing podcasts every weekday. The main story today, I think, is the same as it's been for the last few days. That is the Ukraine war, which is not going to end largely because Zelensky wants to keep fighting. Zelensky can continue to get support from the Europeans. He was yesterday in London visiting with the Prime Minister of London, and Macron came over, and the head of Germany came on over, and they had a big powwow, and they decided that despite President Trump's 28-point peace plan, in which he wanted to concede the territory of the Donbass to Russia, that Zelensky said, no, we're not going to concede any territory. We're going to fight to the end, and we're not going to give up any Ukrainian sovereignty to Russia, which is a damn fool idea, because Russia's already got the territory. I mean, Zelensky, look around. You've lost the eastern part of the country. You lost Crimea. Obama did nothing to defend Crimea. It was fine with Obama if Putin took Crimea. Of course, Obama was working for Putin. He was in the real Russian collusion was Obama and Putin, and anybody with half a brain knew that. The famous on mic comment, or it was off mic, but picked up by a mic, that tell Vladimir that in my second term I'll have more flexibility, is what Obama told Medvedev. What the hell does that mean? You only tell that to the guy you're working for. And so if Putin had Obama by the neck, well, then Obama was the one who was constantly found the ally to destroy the United States in his working with China and with Russia and with every other group that hated America. Being a good Democrat, that's what Obama was obliged to do. So in this meeting here with Macron in the center of the meeting, looking like he's, the bully boy, and Europe is all shaking hands in front of 10 Downing Street that they're gonna fight Russia. Well, it's a damn fool thing to do. And I think what Trump can do to end the war is just simply say, good luck, boys. Have at it. But you don't get any more American money. You don't get any more American war material, and our troops are not going to give you any battlefield guidance. We're pulling out. And Russia will go through the remainder, 20 to 30% of the Donbass, take it over, and probably head to Kiev, where it'll just effectively destroy this Ukrainian government, which deserves to be destroyed, given that it was been working with the Maidan, Virginia Nuland, Soros, State Department, anti-Americans since 2013, when Hillary had her email server and Bill Clinton was at his heyday with the Clinton Foundation, taking money from every two-bit phony oligarch and criminal they could find, like Pinochet in Ukraine. So this whole sad story is one that more people are going to die, and the war is not going to end. There's no way to get the territory back from Russia without a nuclear war. And I don't think Europe is stupid enough. Europe's pretty stupid these days, not stupid enough to do that. By the way, I took a look at the national security assessment that Hegseth put out, and saw what it said about Europe, which was startling but true. Let me just read it. It's on page 25. By the way, this is a very good assessment of the national security of the United States in terms of reviving our domestic industrial defense base, having energy dominance again, preserving and growing America's financial sector dominance, Okay, strong statements about how we can, bolster the United States and the rest of the world can go to hell. Because again, the insanity typified by Europe is just overwhelming, and it's not immediately fixable. And what was said about Europe, just getting to the right page here, page 25, promoting European greatness. American officials have become used to thinking about European problems in terms of insufficient military spending and economic stagnation. There's truth to this, but Europe's real problems are even deeper. Continental Europe has been losing share of global gross domestic product, down from 25% in 1990 to 14% today, partly owing to national and transnational regulations that undermine creativity and industriousness. Yeah, like Germany destroying 3 nuclear power plants last year. But this economic decline is eclipsed by the real and more stark prospect of civilizational erasure. The larger issues facing Europe include activities of the European Union and the other transnational bodies that undermine political liberty and sovereignty, migration policies that are transforming the continent and creating strife, censorship of free speech and suppression of political opposition, cratering birth rates, and loss of national identities and self-confidence. Should present trends continue, the continent will be unrecognizable in 20 years or less. As such, it is far from obvious whether certain European countries will have economies and militaries strong enough to remain reliable allies. Many of these nations are currently doubling down on their present path. We want Europe to remain European, to regain its civilizational self-confidence, and to abandon its failed focus on regulatory suffocation. Okay, so I'm going to read a little bit more, but what they're saying basically is that Islam is taking over Europe and is reaching probably a point where Islam is going to demand Sharia law in major sections of an independence in many of the European countries, and they'll probably have to grant it to them. Now, this National Security Assessment goes on to say the lack of self-confidence is most evident in Europe's relationship with Russia. European allies enjoy a significant hard power advantage over Russia by almost every measure, save nuclear weapons. As a result of Russia's war in Ukraine, European relations with Russia are now deeply attenuated, and many Europeans regard Russia as an existential threat. Managing European relations with Russia will require significant U.S. diplomatic engagement, both to establish conditions of strategic stability across the Eurasian landmass and to mitigate the risk of conflict between Russia and the European states. It is a core interest of the United States to negotiate an expeditious cessation of hostilities in Ukraine in order to stabilize European economies, prevent unintended escalation or expansion of the war, and reestablish strategic stability with Russia, as well as to enable the post-hostility reconstruction of Ukraine to enable its survival as a viable state. Okay, so it's a very good analysis of how Europe has self-destructed, much like the Democratic Party. And the point is that Europe, on its current trajectory, is headed for economic collapse, civilizational collapse. And it says America is understandably sentimentally attached to the European continent, and of course, to Britain and Ireland. The character of these countries is also strategically important because we count upon creative, capable, confident democratic allies to establish conditions of security and stability. We want to work with allied countries that want to restore their former greatness. So again, it's more of a reaching out to Russia to establish stability in Europe and ending the perception with the reality that NATO, as a perpetually expanding alliance, has outserved its usefulness. And NATO itself, I think, is Trump has given it 2 years to become self-sufficient, or we're finished with it. And I think 2 years is too long. We should be able to be finished with Europe and with NATO right now and let them crash and burn. Unfortunately, they're going to do that anyway. And so the reality you're going to find in Islam in Europe is it is not going to in any way be accommodative to assimilating, but it is going to be increasingly a separatist movement that the Europeans, given their ideological confusion with this woke, university-driven insanity on the left, will not be able to counter. They won't even be able to defend their women against gang rapes, or their citizens against criminal attacks. And we're seeing that starting also in New York, where Mondami is appointed, I think, as one of his top law enforcement guys, a former convict. Chris, why don't you come on and comment? This stuff is really is really insanity, and I just don't see any end to it, except for the destruction of Europe.
Oh, well, that's what happens in the background here. I do have the dog inside the studio, but having said that, the West is destroying itself. It's almost like it's self-destructing on purpose. I don't know why it wants to keep waging war with Russia, aside from the fact that maybe they just like the idea of fighting it far away from them on the other side of the continent with money rather than with boots on the ground. Although Starmer, I believe, and Macron suggested that in the past. It just seems they want to destroy themselves, or they want to show their toughness against Vladimir Putin, so they can regain control or their perceived trust of the people in the countries where they live.
Well, the Europeans are never going to support going to war with Russia because they can't. First of all, they can't afford it.
Right.
Secondly, they don't have armies that have been in the field tested in modern times. When was the last war where the Germans or the French or the Italians fought? That was World War II.
Yeah, they didn't do too well in that one.
They didn't do very well in that one. So they
and Europe knows also the continent was devastated in the middle of a war against them.
Yeah, I mean, Europe was left in rubbles.
Right.
We bombed the hell out of it.
But at this point, I don't think a lot of people in power understand history. I do know that we have generations in this country, like most likely Europe, that basically understand history in the most literal or basic sense, victims versus oppressors. So they do fall under that school of thought, a lot of them, that the bigger country invaded the smaller country. But history shows countries get conquered. Territory is won or lost. The problem is the good guys do not always win. And that's
I'm not even sure the Europeans are the good guys anymore. I mean, they're increasingly imposing censorship on their countries. They're increasingly utilizing these tools, all the IT tools that are now developing for surveillance. You can't say anything in Great Britain without being arrested.
Yeah, I should clarify that. The narrative is the good guys are Ukraine and the bad guys are Russia.
Right.
But taking that narrative, these people still have to realize the good guys or the perceived good guys don't always win. Now it's a time where you have to cut your losses and take care of the people who are in the middle of war-torn countries. But Macron, Starmer, Merz, they're far away from it. They're living in luxury, and they don't care what happens to the people in Ukraine or in the Donbas region. As long as they get
even more, they're exploiting them for their own purposes.
Yes, absolutely.
And they continue to want to make Russia the boogeyman when it's not 1950. Russia's not threatening to invade Western Europe. They're not. We don't have a communist movement in Italy that looks like it's going to take over the country.
Yeah, not anymore.
No, I mean,
not anymore.
and so the threat that NATO was created to defend against is largely gone.
Hmm.
And
It's within their own countries now. That ideology.
what they got to do is defend themselves against Islam,
Yes,
and,
that's another one.
and that's the real downfall of Europe is going to be the Islam is going to take it over, and they won't be able to stop it because their own mental structures, their own mental constructs are going to say, well, we can't. We have to be accepting. We can't be. We have to be inclusive. DEI. So we might DIE because of DEI. Doesn't matter.
Well, Pat Buchanan said this in the 1990s. There's a difference between controlling immigration and letting people into the country to contribute, and there's being overrun by immigrants, legal and illegal. And of course, he was called a racist for it. Now we see the fruits, or the let's just say the rotten apples of what happened.
Or even worse, the inviting into the country of our enemies in order to destroy us.
Yes.
Which is where Obama and Biden went.
Well, it can be argued that there are enemies within that infiltrated this country purposefully with such enemies.
Well, how about Tim Walz in Somalia and letting Somalia put a lot of that money, the billions stolen, into Somali terrorists back in Somalia?
Two things about Tim Walz. I've been saying that he's a fool and an absolute moron all these years, or at least the last couple of years since he really came out of the spotlight. The fact is, though, I'm pretty sure he's playing the fool and the moron just to get away with the corruption within his administration and his own corruption in dealings with the Somali immigrant community at this point. And these factions of that community I'm sure they kick things back to him and his buddies. I'm just making the accusation. I don't have the actual ironclad proof in my hand. Secondly, this whole thing about him whining and crying that people are honking on their horns near his house and calling him a retard after Donald Trump called him that. I can't possibly believe that didn't just start now. It must have been happening over several years anyway. I think he's Trump now.
It could have started now. I don't know.
I'm joking again. I am kidding. But the fact is, I just don't think he's the moron he plays himself off to be. I do believe he's corrupt and devious in a lot of ways and tries to play it off like, oh, look at me. Oh, shucks, I'm a knucklehead. And try to get away with it. Now the magnifying glass is on him and the Somali community there.
Well, gold today is at $4,216 an ounce, and silver at $58.85 an ounce. And please visit Swiss America. Take a look at this Walking Liberty $50 offer, where you can get up to 250 of these coins, which are almost pure silver for what they're worth in silver. And you'll begin to experience how to increase your value with your money rather than just simply throw it away with the inflated prices we're seeing all around the country and all around the world. And I've noticed also that something startling about the housing market, which is being picked up over here by Zero Hedge, and that is that the housing market is experiencing a loss. People are just taking their houses off the market because they're not selling at the prices people want to sell them for. In other words, the housing bubble has largely started to burst. And if that happens, that's going to be, again, a major factor for an economic downturn. So I'm encouraging people to call Swiss America and get a copy of this book we've written, which is how the coming global economic crisis is going to cause a historic gold rush, and take advantage of it. Even if you take advantage of silver, at least you're getting precious metals. Okay, now the other thing I think is beginning to shape up. There's two things I'm watching that I think are below the surface, just beginning to come into play. Number one is that the judges and the opposition to Trump from within the Department of Justice and within the federal judiciary is getting to be obvious and intolerable. This whole idea that you've got this new Supreme Court justice from Harvard who says that Trump can't fire the bureaucracy is, again, has she ever read the Constitution? I mean, where's the Department of Education in the Constitution? It's not. And then you've got the Democrats running the cities into the ground. New York City is going to have a massive flight out of New York City just as soon as you get Mondami to take office. When does Mondami take office? Does it get in January?
I
Do you know,
believe in
Chris?
New York City, they swear in new officials on January 1st.
Well, that'll be a thing to behold, won't it?
Happy New Year.
Yeah.
The bomb is the bowling ball isn't the only thing that's going to drop, I guess. On he wants to bring back the homeless camps again.
Yeah, bring back the homeless camps, defund the police.
Remember Dinkins? Mayor Dinkins allowed the homeless to sleep in the Gracie Mansion yard, if I remember correctly.
Yes, he did for a while.
It's the idea they want to show off that they're nice to the homeless, but they're not going to do anything about it. They're just going to make them sleep in the streets in the freezing cold again. That doesn't help anyone.
Oh, and by the way, we're gonna have a cold winter here, and it's already been snowing in the New York, New Jersey area.
Yes,
and I've said when I wrote the book, The Truth About Energy, Global Warming, and Climate Change, I was predicting that we would have a cooling period right now because the sun activity is actually slowing down. Okay, now they're asking on Zero Hedge, what's the likelihood of a NATO Russian non-aggression pact? And maybe that's the most effective way to get European security. It's nil. Russia's not going to sign a non-aggression pact with NATO. Russia wants NATO pulled back from Ukraine and have a buffer where there's actually a sphere of influence buffer, just like we don't want to have, the Kremlin in Cuba. We did in 1962. We still don't today. And I think we're more likely to attack and go after Maduro pretty quickly here. I think we're just waiting to do it. And when Maduro goes, that's going to have a major impact all across South America. South America has also gone through a period of revival of communism and a revival of anti-Americanism. Bolsonaro and Brazil and others have been oppressed because they were supporters of Donald Trump. So Netanyahu, by the way, is going to reject retiring in exchange for a pardon. I've encouraged Netanyahu to retire, get out while the getting is good. He's could certainly be a hero today for all he's accomplished to save Israel from Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthi rebels. He's been in power for over 30 years. He's been prime minister 3 different times. And it's probably a good idea to take a bow. But I don't expect it to happen. At any rate, I do expect that we're going to see a really reconfiguration here now of the global alignments. And Trump is going to, I think, be much more conscious of countering China's expansion in the Southern Hemisphere, of working with Russia to bolster Europe, and to do what he can to get these European nations to understand that their problem today is not Russian invasion, but it's Muslim takeover. And again, these are things that are going to fundamentally have to play out in our politics. Well, I think that the next domestic effort is going to be on the voter integrity issue, because Donald Trump is already making moves to explain how many illegal votes there are from dead people on the rolls and all the rest. And Donald Trump is fully aware of the algorithms. I've been working with Peter Tickton for a long time, and the algorithms are such that Donald Trump understands that if he doesn't get rid of the formulas within the state databases that permit the creation of these false voters and getting them legitimate state voter IDs where they can be used in voter mail-in frauds, the problem will just reappear. not going to be the repeated 2024 unless fundamental measures are taken. And fundamental measures may involve blue states that refuse to cooperate, using the military to run the elections under the Article 2 powers the president has as commander-in-chief. And that could cause a major democratic flare-up, because the Democrats, without cheating, stealing, lying, will have no power whatsoever. With the mainstream media, without the mainstream media support, the Democrats are dead in the water. At any rate, I think we're seeing a situation play out over the next few days in which it's going to be clear that Donald Trump tells Europe that he's done with supporting Zelensky. And I think the next step will be for Donald Trump and Putin to declare that Zelensky is not the legitimate head of state of Ukraine, and to demand that Ukraine have an election to put someone legitimately in that position. This is Dr. Jerome Corsi today. It's Tuesday. It's December 9th, 2025. CorsiNation.com. And the end God always wins. God's going to win here too. And please do join me in spirit of 2 Chronicles 7:14, getting on my knees and our knees to ask God to forgive us for letting the world get to this point where Christians are persecuted, where God is held in disgrace, and where the insanity of gender madness is returning us to a pagan reality that is certain to spell civilization decline. Thank you for joining us on CorsiNation.com. We'll be back every weekday. God bless.